For my project, I decided to present about the Medici family. This is their family crest. The spheres are said to represent oranges, which were a symbol of wealth and power. This the Medicis certainly had. They ruled over the Renaissance era and were quite influential. They were perhaps the most influential group of people at the time in the artistic, economic, and religious fields of the Renaissance. The Medicis controlled it all, really, and were certainly very influential. They started small and built up to be one of the wealthiest families alive. Their reign, air quotes, lasted from 1300 to 1700, which was pretty much the whole Renaissance. The Medicis were an incredibly talented and prosperous type of people. They distributed their power through many fields. They commissioned art, and some of them even became popes. They were also very, very well known for their system of banks, which they started themselves and then spread all throughout Italy. As this Explain Everything goes on, you'll get to learn more about the fields that the Medicis were involved in and how each family member influenced that field. The Medicis were a family that enjoyed life immensely, due to their wealth and influential power. In particular, Cosimo de' Medici was an influential figure during the early Renaissance. Cosimo was famously wealthy, and he had a lot of time on his hands, so he particularly liked to commission art, specifically paintings and architecture. He loved art of any form. Even literature. He had his own library. Cosimo was good friends with the sculptor Donatello, who was quite famous during the early Renaissance and sculpted the biblical figure David. He set hard to work after Cosimo commissioned him to make the figure, and voila! The sculpture was done and set in the courtyard of Cosimo. This sculpture beautifully shows the value of humanism in the Renaissance through its natural pose, extreme detail, and skill in crafting. It really is quite the quintessential Renaissance sculpture. Now, as said before, the Medicis had quite a lot of money, so Cosimo thought, why don't I build a palace? A really, really big palace. I like palaces. The architect Michelozzo said, I have an idea for a great palace. And so Cosimo commissioned him to build a beautiful piece of architecture. This is a 3-story high palace. The inside is quite grand, note the Medici family crest, right here. The remarkable interior with extraordinary art, and the intricately carved rooms. The Medici family palace still stands today in the streets of Florence as a monument to their immense wealth and power. Isn't it great? Cosimo loved art so much. Aha, he decided, I want more. He then funded Brunelleschi, the famous architect, to finish the Cathedral of Florence. Brunelleschi set hard to work on his famously large dome, and soon completed it under the care of Cosimo. When it was complete, it was one of the largest domes of the entire world. This third commission by Cosimo is truly an astounding piece of architecture as well. Clearly, the Medicis were very influential in the world of Renaissance art, whether it be the David, the Dome, or the Palace of Medici that they commissioned. Their vast wealth and power allowed the Medici family to be very influential in the field of Renaissance art. They funded many famous pieces. The Medicis were also very influential in the economy of Italy. They were probably the most wealthy family alive when they lived during the Renaissance time. They certainly had the greatest effect on trade. They got their wealth through the wool industry. During the Renaissance, most of Florence's trade was based on wool. Fuzz was imported and made into yarn, which was then sold as garments, and that's where the money came from. And of course, the Medicis controlled it all. They had power over all the trade in and out of Florence, and so had power over all the money, as well as the sheep. Holding all this money provided a major organizational problem. To help organize all the money and trade and commerce that they were controlling, the Medici family decided to open a system of banks. Yes, banks. The family loved money, so why not make even more money by owning the biggest bank in Florence? In Italy, actually. The Medici banks helped customers in several ways. One was by creating the traveler's check. Traveler's checks allowed people to carry money around without actually carrying money around, so it wouldn't get stolen and it wouldn't be so heavy anymore. They also excelled in exchanging foreign currency for the local money, better known as the florin. The Medicis helped to make the florin the most widely accepted piece of currency in all of Italy. They also helped organize accounting. When people would bring money in and take money out, it used to be a very disorganized process. The clerk would start to write something and then write something else, and soon there were scribble marks all over the paper, and it was very disorganized and nobody liked it. The Medicis, however, helped to make things nice and neat by inventing a very new process. They were some of the first to use a new method called double-entry bookkeeping. The Medicis revolutionized this process and brought it to light in the banking world. Here's how it works. So this lady would like to give this nice lady money. Each has an account. While the sum is subtracted from this lady's account, it is added to this lady's account. It's much more efficient, really. Everyone likes that. Especially the Medicis. The Florentine economy was quite influenced by the Medicis. They were really rather rock stars of the Italian economy. They controlled it all and made life much easier. And now we come to the subject of religion. Believe it or not, the Medicis were even influential here. I mean, if you control the economy and art of the Renaissance, why not control the religion too? It's like 3 in 1. First, Cosimo decided to host an ecumenical council. This meant he had a council involving all the most important religious figures in Italy. Cosimo wanted to join the East Church with the West Church. They were divided, you see. Now, things didn't really go Cosimo's way, but he did manage to bring together a bunch of religious figures, which was good because he got people talking again. And now we come to the Medici popes. There were 2, Leo X and Clement VII. They were both powerful Medicis and, of course, both powerful popes. Leo was a good pope. He kept his people happy by driving out religious invaders. He kept the papacy made up of Italians. To keep the peace, he even excommunicated the famous writer Martin Luther. Clement VII, meanwhile, was not so good of a pope. Charles V, an invader to Italy, came and pretty much took all the power of Rome away from the popes, and practically ran away with it. Clement became powerless. Things got worse when Henry VIII became involved. Henry grew mad that the Pope did not grant him divorce from his wife, which was illegal in the church, so Henry decided to take away all the Pope's power. He passed several acts making him supreme head of the church, and poor Clement was left quite dejected. Certainly he was influential even in a bad way. In fact, both Leo X and Clement VII were very, very influential popes during the time of the Renaissance. So, let's do a recap. This is a lot to take in, so I'll just review it. This is a Medici. There were lots of them. They lived in Florence, Italy, during the time of the Renaissance, which lasted from 1300 to 1700. They were well known for their power, but mostly their money. They had lots and lots and lots and lots of money. But don't worry, they weren't tyrants. They used their money for good things, such as art. They commissioned art. They really liked art, so they paid for it to be made. They liked art in many forms. Cosimo de' Medici in particular liked to commission art. He would fund artists to make fantastic works which are still around today, such as Donatello's David, this amazing bronze cast sculpture. Also well known is the Medici Palace. Note the arched windows and the arched doors and the cool designs they have along the top. The inside has an amazing courtyard. Note again the Medici family crest, the Greek and Roman type columns, and lots of arches all throughout the designs. The interior is just as amazing, with beautiful paintings on the ceilings. Note the Renaissance type figures. These were also made by famous artists, and paid for by Medicis. If it hadn't been for Cosimo's generous fundings, it is likely that most of the Renaissance pieces of art that I've mentioned here wouldn't be existing today. Just look at this beautiful dome that he helped to fund. These are people up there. This is huge. It was so big for the time, it's almost like a mystery how they did it. The Medicis were also powerful in the economy of Florence. The Medicis were almost like kings, they were so wealthy. But they weren't kings. They got all their power from the Florence wool trade. Commanding it meant commanding the money. They organized commerce with their banks. Remember the traveler's checks and the florins that they used? And they also revolutionized the double-entry bookkeeping style of banking. It's very organized. 2 accounts. We love efficiency. And lastly, the Medicis were powerful in the religious field of the Renaissance. They were Catholics. Cosimo hosted the Ecumenical Council. Even if joining the East and West didn't work, religious leaders at least got together. Then there was Pope Leo X. He was a pretty good pope by our standards. He kept his people happy, even if it meant excommunicating Martin Luther. Clement VII, meanwhile, wasn't very good. Remember King Henry? How he lost all the Pope's power to him? And Rome? How he lost that too? Despite this mishap, all the Medicis were still very, very influential in the Renaissance, in the artistic fields, whether it be Donatello's sculptures or Brunelleschi's architecture. Their funds made great things possible. The Medicis were also very influential on the economy of Italy. Their banks revolutionized accounting and made things much more organized in the trade world. Finally, the Medicis were very influential in the religion of Italy. They supplied popes and pretty much kept the power going as long as they could. Well, that's it, everyone. I hope you learned that the Medicis were a very, very influential family on the time of the Renaissance.